Now we are encroaching upon the top 5, and coming in at number 5 for me is Objection! Okay, listen. Objection! Is an amazing case. It's an incredible case. It's a very long case. It's a very good case, but it's a number 5 for me. Hey guys, it's Michaela, and welcome back to another ranking video. I truly cannot believe we made it here and we are able to say this, but we have finally completed a full playthrough of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Justice for All, and Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trials and Tribulations, which means in today's video, we will be ranking every single case from the original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy. This video will be more so focused on ranking the cases as a whole without getting too much into the specific characters themselves. But if you're interested in my thoughts on every single individual character from the first trilogy, I have an entire playlist of me ranking them as well. So definitely check those out when you're done watching this video, as this will be more of a broad case overview. Y'all, it was so interesting going back through all 14 of the cases from the original trilogy. Obviously, some of these cases I have not played in over a year, so memory was not super good on them. And let me just say, going back and seeing all of the dots connect from beginning to end gave me a brand new appreciation for this franchise, especially because there was not a single case out of the 14 that was a bad case to me. And that's an important distinction I can go ahead and talk about now. Guys, these are my opinions. You may vehemently disagree with the order I'm gonna rank these cases in today. That's totally fine. I know a lot of the people in this fandom are diehard fans, and I love that for you guys, and I'm not with you, but my perspective will be from somebody who is a real life lawyer who plays these for fun, has not had a ton of time to deeply research into every single individual aspect, and is more so just like a casual, what did this case make me feel kind of ranking. So with that being said, to me, there was not a single bad case. There were cases that had bad elements, but it made this ranking very difficult at times, let me freaking tell you. Because the cases that are at the bottom of the list are still great cases. I think every single case in this first trilogy is absolutely playable. Are some of them replayable? That's debatable. I'll be talking about as much of the story and case details from these cases as necessary to really share my thoughts and opinions, but I'm not gonna be summarizing the entire cases, so not to make this video unnecessarily long, because respectfully, last week's video took it out of me. Okay, we're chilling today. We're just talking, we're vibing, and we are thriving. So before we get into this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're notified of when I post new videos. And with that, let's get into this case ranking. Again, these are my gut reactions and my personal opinions. I would love to see your ranking down in the comments, so please leave me a comment with your rankings down there. And I'm so glad we are able to wrap this trilogy up once and for all before moving into a brand new series, if you will, next week. But for now, let's get into the rankings. Coming in strong at number 14, we have Turnabout Big Top. You know, even knowing my thoughts on this case before I went back and researched for this video, I was kind of surprised that it ended up in dead last, but that was genuinely where it ended up just ranking amongst the other 13 cases. And honestly, rightfully so. This case had so much potential, especially for me, because again, I'm sprinkling in my personal preferences, interests, and likes into my rankings here. I love magic. I wanted to be, well, I wouldn't say I wanted to be a magician as a kid, but I had a little magic kit. I went to magic shows. I did magic for my parents. You know, who didn't? It was set in a circus. How fun is that? Like, the setting, the scene of this case was perfect for me. I loved it the moment I stepped in. And shortly after I stepped in is where the problems began. And boy, were there a lot of those. Had they just aged Regina up, like at least 5 years, I'm not asking for a lot here, that case would have probably gone so differently in a lot of people's minds. And in my character ranking videos, listen, we didn't necessarily take into account the just blatant underage creepiness that was going on amongst almost every character, but here we did. That was a choice. That was a choice by the creators and the writers of this game to make her 16, and they did not have to do that. I personally do not care what the age of consent is in Japan. That does not change my opinion or disgust toward that case and that particular element whatsoever. This case did also have a lot of interesting characters for me. Again, maybe just because I love the whole circus trope, but Ben and Trillo, one of the characters being a literal dummy and his ventriloquist, that is a hilarious concept. Obviously, we had Mo, extremely problematic, but again, so much potential being that he was a clown. Acro and Bat's story was heartbreaking. Regina even had her sparkle, if you will. And then we had Russell Berry, who I had a lot of mixed feelings about, because you have a guy who is so generous to everyone, his friends, his family, his employees. That is so admirable. But on the other hand, we also have Russell Berry, who lets grown men date his young child daughter and shoots lions in the backyard for funsies when they do things that lions do. Like that, Even the whole Money the monkey being attracted to shiny things, loved. Like, what a fun concept. They had so much potential. They had the bones, but they didn't put it together. Obviously, Mo's testimony was one of the most torturous throughout the entire trilogy. I'm pretty sure that's no secret. And what really sealed the deal on ranking this at the very bottom for me was just the plethora of things that were so far-fetched, so unrealistic, or just flat out didn't make sense. Acro's blanket? I will never, ever forgive the game for that. Ever. Like, you're telling me the bust, the murder weapon, was hiding in the bottom of Acro's wheelchair under a blanket that you didn't even show me. And I was just supposed to jail. And the cloak getting caught on the bust so perfectly as to resemble a human being flying through the air after the bust hit the ringmaster in the head. BFFR. One thing I do appreciate is how this case ended, with a lot of people seeming to come to a lot of necessary realizations that really wouldn't have happened had this case not happened. So I did like the ending, the fact that Mo took over the circus and kept everybody employed. That was cool. And the cliffhanger at the end where it turns out the entire time Edgeworth was actually helping Gumshoe and in turn Phoenix to solve this mystery, teasing Edgeworth's return. Oh, I did love that. But unfortunately not enough to negate the severe issues that this case had sprinkled out from beginning to end. So that is why it has landed in the very, very bottom spot. But listen, we gotta start somewhere. Turnabout Big Top was the second game's third case, and also from the second game, coming in at number 13, we have The Lost Turnabout. This was the tutorial case of the second game, and it was not a bad case at all, but obviously tutorial cases only have like 1 or 2 episodes. We really don't have as much to work with, so it's harder to obsess over than like some of these longer, more detailed cases. And while it's not my favorite first case, I don't really understand all of the absolute hate for this case there appears to be online. I personally actually really liked some aspects of it. This was our amnesia case, and yes, while that's like a really obvious premise for a tutorial, I feel like it's obvious for a reason. It's a great premise for why Phoenix, who we just went through 5 other cases with, now all of a sudden can't remember anything and needs instruction. I do think it's one of those things you do once and you never do again. You can't just keep making the guy get hit in the head and losing his memory. That's not gonna work. But for one time, especially in the beginning, I liked it. And again, there wasn't a ton to work with, so I don't have a lot to say on this case, but the 2 things that really stuck out to me that, again, were contradictions I really respected and appreciated. The Maggie versus Maggie thing, I know a lot of people thought that was stupid. It got me. It did. So clearly it had something to it, because I was truly sitting there stumped for some time. A lot of the contradictions felt just very intuitive. The baseball glove being another one. I played softball for a few years growing up, so when I saw that baseball glove, I immediately knew it was not for the right hand of the victim. Maybe that's something if you did not play baseball or softball, you wouldn't immediately pick up on. But again, once you really found those contradictions, they were very satisfying to me. And again, I liked the case, but it just didn't have enough meat to it to be ranked any higher than where it is. So alas, it sits at 13. Coming in at number 12, we have another tutorial case, Turnabout Memories. I have similar thoughts on this case of, again, there not being so much to say because it was only 2 episodes long, kind of bare bones, a little bit interesting here and there, but not overall a ton to talk about. But it was a little bit easier to rank the tutorial from the third game above the tutorial from the second game because of the sheer amount of stuff it set up. Like, holy freaking crap, to see the actual meeting of Mia and Phoenix, to be able to witness Phoenix as a college student and to see his drastic growth from kid to adult. Obviously, that was incredibly annoying at times because Phoenix as a college kid was incredibly annoying. But one thing I did like about that is that he is an art student. He was an art major and became a lawyer. And something I have sprinkled in throughout some of my videos over the years, you can become a lawyer and major in anything you want. Criminology, political science, art, music, freaking English, I don't care. Like any major you choose in undergrad, you can still go to law school and have a successful life. And I like that that was shown here. It also just tells you that lawyers have personality traits and hobbies outside of just being a lawyer sometimes, especially those of us who are a little more creative and artistic. So that was obviously really cool. This case also introduced Dahlia. So again, there was so much building up in this case that would just carry us through the entire rest of the game. It's crazy. Other than that, the story was fine. It was interesting enough. The electrocution was an interesting aspect. Definitely your switch up from the old stabbing or shooting kind of murder. And all in all, it was a solid case. It did what it needed to do, but not one that I would purposefully go back and spend a ton of time replaying. Coming in at number 11, and this may surprise some of you, so hey, we're getting into it. Turnabout Beginnings. This was another shorter case, and the one thing I can say about this case that I do have for it is respect. While it was not my favorite case in and of itself, I can absolutely appreciate the necessity of this case for the case that followed. It provided us with build up and with context that we absolutely needed and wanted, and it allowed us to really dive deeply into Dahlia's devilish ways and where it kind of all started. Obviously, Terry has proven to be a very controversial character as well, on one hand with the whole underage grooming Dahlia situation, and on the other hand, the fact that he was literally destined to fail. He had everything working against him. People were lying on his name, got him thrown away for absolutely no reason, and there might be just some mental capacity issues there as well. And him unaliving himself in live court in front of everybody, scarring Mia, scarring Edgeworth, scarring the judge, just it was a scene. But even with that, the actual premise of the case, the details of it, didn't really do anything for me. It wasn't the most interesting to me personally, again, aside from my understanding of what came after it. But without the case, we would not have had the context we needed to make some of these other cases so incredibly special, and that is why it has landed at number 11. Coming in at case number 10, we have Turnabout Samurai, the first game's third case. I'll start this case off by saying one of the reasons it's so low is kind of the opposite of Turnabout Big Top, and that being the scene of where this case is set does not particularly interest me. I'm not an action girly. Action movies, superheroes, things like that do not interest me, could not interest me less actually, which is why I even brought that up when I had reacted to the Batman animated series reaction video I did a while back, saying I had never seen a Batman movie. Y'all were surprised by that, but just action, the whole just fighting thing, it just doesn't do it for me, and that probably knocked it down a peg or two. But the premise of the case aside, what I can appreciate about this case is how much it's set up in terms of the relationships, some of the characters, and just kind of how the game flows and how it would be played going forward. This was the first case where we saw Phoenix and Maya work as one investigative team. This case brought us quite a few reoccurring characters that are kind of important. I mean, we have Old Bag, we have Will Powers, and this is also the case where the ladder versus step ladder discussion was born, which is precious. This case unfortunately also gave us Salmonella, so you can't win them all, can you? I thought Cody Hackins played an interesting role. We really got to see Phoenix's passion for the absolute truth, no matter who you are or your age, come out, which was very important going forward. I also remember really liking Penny, like her simplicity, her like nerdiness. As somebody who identifies as a nerd myself, like I could just really relate to her just kind of being there for the vibe. She's like, yeah, I know the tea, don't really want to get into it, but like, I guess I'll tell you, like, I'm just kind of here to do my job in GTFO. This was also the first time Phoenix's life was truly put in danger, and it would not be the last. But in this case, it was when Vasquez threatened to erase me with her mafia members. Yeah, that was something that definitely stuck. And it also established Gumshoe's routine of just popping in and saving my literal life right before the last second, which we also saw happen many more times after. Continuing along the lines of character development, this was also the first time we saw Edgeworth kind of put his winningness to the side for the truth. I mean, he helped me throughout Vasquez's testimony when I hit a dead end. He's the one that had it continue to actually get the truth about what happened. And that was really important to show that Edgeworth had a little bit more into him besides just his record. The contradictions in the case were fine. I thought the whole photo of the samurai costumes leg dragging, I noticed that immediately. So, you know, that was kind of fun. The case did have some good twists. I really liked how poetic the ending of the case was, where Hammer actually ended up dying in the exact same manner that he had killed someone in 5 years prior. Loved that. But all in all, after all of the compliments I just gave this case, again, I've listed a few of my critiques, the main one being it just was not very interesting to me personally, and I do feel like it dragged on a bit. And I would sum this case up by saying it had some great twists with a lot of uninteresting tidbits between the twists, leaving it at number 10 for me. Coming in at number 9, we have Turnabout Sisters, our second case from the first game. This was the first case in my review that actually gave me a pretty severe bout of nostalgia. Like, remembering Maya and her coming into our lives for the first time, seeing that her sister had just tragically been killed. Not only that, but she was being blamed for it. Oh my God, like, it really tugged at my heartstrings. Like, this was the first case that I would actually be interested in playing again, even though I feel like it was only like a year ago when I played it the first time, but just the feelings that came back to me were heavy. Because this case was from the first game, similar to Turnabout Samurai, it also set up a brand new cast of characters and some storylines that we would flesh out many cases down the line. I mean, this case introduced Edgeworth, who had an undefeated record at the time, and boy, did we see how that changed. This was also the case where we learned about the Faye clan and Misty Faye's disappearance, something that would plague me every single case going forward until we finally learned the truth. We were introduced to Red White in this case, which we had no idea would be so important, so relevant, so monumental later when we met a different character. And the pull this man had, the fact that he was known for blackmailing people, and not only that, that he had blackmailed several people into offing themselves, mind-blowing to me at the time. Speaking of Red White, this was also Phoenix's first time being battered, but as we've learned, it certainly wouldn't be the last. We met Gumshoe for the first time in this case as well, and this was also the case with the infamous updated autopsy report, which I honestly, now that I think about it, don't know if I've fully forgiven Edgeworth for. Edgeworth had told April May, the witness, not to release certain information on the stand unless it was specifically asked of her, which to me obviously meant he was trying to hide stuff. So we have Red White, the blackmailer of all blackmailers, who also has dirt on the police and kind of controls them as well. And then we also have a prosecutor who hides evidence, updates autopsy report, working in cahoots. It was terrible. It was terrible all around. Edgeworth did not look good in this case at all. I had no idea at the time how much of an influence Red White's actions would be on this entire series. The fact that he's kind of the reason for Misty Faye's disappearance, and that he's the one that sold the information to the press about how the case she was involved with went wrong. The fact that he's the reason Mia even became an attorney is to find out more information about that. And he was so powerful that at some point in the case, he had Gumshoe arrest Phoenix and have Phoenix be put on trial for Mia's murder. Like, what? Luckily, this case also had Mia helping me, which allowed us to see the spirit channeling in person in real time in action for the first time. And this case is monumental because it resulted in Edgeworth's first loss, though it would not be his last, as well as Phoenix and Maya teaming up, taking over Mia Faye's law office and developing Wright & Co. I did really like that the murder weapon used in the case before this one and in this case happened to be the exact same. That was a really cool tie-in. And this case touched on a really interesting topic, pro se representation, which is when you represent yourself. You do not hire a separate lawyer to represent you. Something that is not recommended 99% of the time. If you guys want more information on that, I have like a whole series of videos about legal terms everybody should know, so I'll link those in case you're interested. But it was a very interesting topic nonetheless. And all in all, I really appreciate the groundwork that this case laid. Again, things that happened in this case were so integral to the entire story of the first trilogy, and you would have never known it. So the reason this case is ranked so low for me personally, mainly 3 reasons. One, I did learn that this case was supposed to be the first case of the game, and you can kind of feel it. Like, it feels a little bare bones, not a lot of logical reaching you have to do with some of these contradictions, and just overall feels a little basic. Going back, the replay value of this case really wasn't there for me. Like, it's not one I feel the need to go back and do again. I kind of got it the first time. And most importantly, the ending. The ending was so unsatisfying to me. The fact that we put in all of that work just for Mia to swoop in, pull out a list of names that she just started reading, and then Red White just breaks down, gives up everything, and it's over. I don't know. The ending, not my favorite. I don't think that's an unpopular opinion, but those are the main reasons it was ranked 1 below the next case I'm about to give you, leaving us in place number 9. Moving us into slot number 8, we have The First Turnabout. This was the very first case, the very first first trial, Phoenix's first trial of the entire trilogy. And of course it was a murder trial. Like Phoenix's first trial being a murder trial, I just remember that being absolutely insane. Usually in real life, you start with misdemeanors and you work your way up to felonies. Not usually your first one out the gate, but I truly think this was the perfect case to kick off the entire franchise. It was clear, it was clean, but it was interesting enough to hook you. And going back through this case, I actually really like it. Like it was kind of hard not to rank this case a little higher. I'm gonna be so honest with you guys, but it only has one episode. There wasn't like a ton of depth, obviously, so we gotta be reasonable here. But I loved the contradictions in this one. I found them so interesting. They weren't stupid easy, but not so hard that players would get frustrated and give up either. Like the clock being 9 hours fast instead of 3 hours slow. That simple little change really sets up the fact that you have to think outside of the box for this game. Even though something seems straightforward, does not mean it always is. And of course, set up the whole look at it from a different angle thing from Mia. I love that Phoenix only took this case because of Larry being the defendant, his best friend at the time, and we also subsequently got to see Larry absolutely fold like a lawn chair when Payne started provoking him with the whole girlfriend doesn't want you thing. And the fact that the murderer in this case was just a common burglar posing as a newspaper salesman who got to see the times people were and were not home, and Cindy just happened to come home at the wrong time. Very interesting, again, just to start the series off. Aside from my love for the contradictions, this was one of my favorite breakdowns to date still. Obviously, this was the very first case. This case will always have a very special place in my heart from a nostalgia element and just introducing me to the entire franchise element. But the toupee throwing will always be iconic for me. Like, oh, I loved it. This case was like a little bit above Turnabout Sisters for me, landing it in number 8. Those are the bottom half of the 14 cases. So moving into the top half, coming in at number 7, we have Recipe for Turnabout. And believe it or not, this case wasn't super memorable to me. Like, I did like this scene once again. The fact that it was set in like a cutesy little French restaurant, adorable. And it did have some really interesting characters, some not so interesting. Didn't love Victor Kudo. Bruto wasn't really that relevant. Basil wasn't really that relevant. Glenn was kind of relevant. I mean, he was our victim, so we didn't get to see a lot of him, but the premise of him being a gambling addict, getting into so much debt to the point where he has to take out a loan from a really sketchy loan shark. He wins the lottery and can actually pay off his debt and then decides to tell people that he's won the lottery, making himself a target. Yeah, it was an interesting concept, but it wasn't just the most exciting for me, I guess, personally. This Satan imposter thing was weird, but you know, Furio Tigre's character obviously did add a lot. I don't think the case would have been the same without him. I think Victor Kudo's testimony was just a waste of time entirely. I think we can all agree on that. John Armstrong, how could we forget? He was something. I did really like Violetta's character, and again, her story with the whole car crash and traumatic brain injury thing, very, very sad. But I don't know what it is about this case. It just doesn't really give me the feeling that I'm looking for to rank it higher. The potassium cyanide poisoning and just the story of how everything happened was interesting, but I don't really know what to say. Like, I don't really have a lot to defend my position other than this is just a feeling I'm having. It kind of just sits somewhere in the middle for me. It's not a bad case by any means, but there are certainly many cases that are much better, leaving it in slot number 7. Coming in strong at case number 6, we have the Stolen Turnabout, the second case from the third game. And this is where things really start to pick up for me. I feel like the top 6 cases, you really can't go wrong. Like, there are some critiques, but this case was so interesting, mainly for one reason, and that's because it was the first time we started a case without it being a murder trial. We started this case off as grand larceny. There was a theft, and that was what the case was. It was a theft. And then of course, we ended the case with murder. This was the case where my feelings for Larry really went from irritation to anger. I think Larry was the absolute worst he has been in the entire trilogy, in this case in particular, with the sheer amount of women he hit on, Desiree, Maya, and Pearl, to name a few, and the fact that he was not at his guard post when the murder happened because he was dealing with his ex-girlfriend too. Larry was just absolutely atrocious here. But this case introduced us to Godot, and obviously we all know how important of a character Godot ended up being. I remember loving Godot in the beginning, and I still really appreciate his character, if you will. The whole coffee thing, I love it. You know what it is? I think it just reminds me of Animal Crossing a little bit. Animal Crossing New Horizons to be specific. And The Roost, I think it's called, the whole coffee situation there. I don't know why that connects for some reason for me. I also just love coffee in real life. But Godot's coffee related parts of his character, I freaking love. The throwing it at Phoenix's head thing, hilarious. Like, obviously that's still insane to happen in a courtroom, but compared to Franziska's whippings, I will take a coffee being thrown at my head any day. Obviously Godot birthed our rap, so we will forever appreciate him for that, or I will pull a Godot. And this was also our first time seeing Budgie, and I was not a fan, not at all. Some of the investigation portions of this case did feel a little bit dragged out to me. I do think this case overall could have been a little bit more condensed. And Ron's character, as we all know, was very infuriating to defend. Like, it's not that I have any beef with Ron as a person. I don't mind his character. I think it was very interesting, but just defending somebody like that was pure torture, I'm not gonna lie. But I do think a lot of the good outweighs the not so good of this case, and the final cherry on top, Luke Atmey trying to have an alibi for the murder he committed by trying to be convicted of the larceny he committed. That was mind-blowing. That, in combination with the case not starting off as a murder trial and ending with a murder trial, ranks it at number 6 for me. It was a really solid case. Again, had some flukes, don't they all, but overall, definitely belongs in the top 6. Now we are encroaching upon the top 5, and coming in at number 5, for me, is Rise from the Ashes. Okay, listen, Rise from the Ashes is an amazing case. It's an incredible case. It's a very long case. It's a very good case, but it's a number 5 for me. This was the 5th case of the first game, although my understanding is it was created after the entire trilogy itself. So there's a lot of references in Rise from the Ashes to other cases that came before it technically, but came after it for me since I played Rise from the Ashes first, if that makes sense. I thought that was really cool, going through the cases that came after Rise from the Ashes and having you guys comment, hey, did you notice this thing? It was in Rise from the Ashes. It was in the picture frame. It was on the wall. It was on this cup, like whatever. Love that. The case started off quite bittersweet since Maya Fey was gone to go focus on her spirit training, but we did get to meet Emma Skye, scientifically speaking. And the case started off with our client, Lana Skye, Emma Skye's sister. Are we seeing some parallels there? Admitting to the murder, which was very different at the time. But because this case was created so long after the other ones, it had a lot of really cool elements that the other cases just didn't have. The luminol fluid for the blood stains, the dust for the fingerprints, the whole security video in and of itself. Listen, I actually don't hate the Blue Badger like some of us do. I just appreciate it as part of the Ace Attorney culture. It's part of us. The Blue Badger is us. We are the Blue Badger. We are all one. And the surveillance video even existing was really cool. Again, I practice law in real life, and whenever I get a case, the first thing I check on is surveillance. I do a lot of car accidents. So the first thing I want to see is, was this crash caught on film? And if it is, oh my God. The feeling you get when you can actually prove something happened because it was on video is like, it's out of this world, truly. And the fact that we had a surveillance video in this case was so freaking cool. On the other hand, the vase minigame, who do I need to talk to about that? I also wasn't a huge fan of some of the characters, just their personality traits in the game. Jake Marshall didn't really do much for me. As somebody who spent a lot of her childhood in Texas, like, I don't know. It didn't hit for some reason for me. Angel Star, similarly, the whole lunchbox thing, didn't really care about it. Angel Star is also one of the worst witnesses I had come across at the time. Like, that testimony was atrocious. And as much as I didn't enjoy Officer Meekins' character, I do remember the pure feeling of vindication I felt when he had come into Edgeworth's office to give him very crucial information. Edgeworth shooed him off like a fly, and it turns out that information was very necessary for Edgeworth later. He ended up wondering why nobody had told him about the information, and then Gumshoe was like, Meekins tried, babes, but you decided he was a little peewee, he was beneath you, and you didn't listen. Learned your lesson. Everybody needs to be treated with kindness and respect, no matter their position. I loved that. Gumshoe's loyalty to Edgeworth also really shined in this case. Like the fact that he risked getting fired and did end up getting fired just to save Edgeworth from basically leaving the legal field. Chef's kiss. I loved Gant when I first met him, and the fact that he just ended up being so evil really broke my heart. That might have been my first heartbreak of the trilogy, honestly. And using the evidence rulebook to defeat Gant and Gant's breakdown, that was priceless. This case also just had some elements that are just unforgettable to me. The fact that Edgeworth transported the dead body in his own trunk and did not know. Holy freaking crap. I was shook when I learned that. The fact that in the SL9 incident, they convicted an innocent man who was sentenced to death? What? And just the whole premise of Bruce Goodman being killed in 2 places at the exact same time. This case was just so interesting to me. As interesting as it did get a little convoluted at times. As I mentioned, this case was very long. So if I had to critique something, okay, no case is perfect, but I do think it, for me, was sometimes a little hard to follow. But again, all of the characters we were introduced to, all of the backstory, all of the pure evil in terms of the planning, the Blue Badger, the fact that Edgeworth ended on a cliffhanger saying he chooses death and just leaving us like that, this case was amazing. But for me, it was not as amazing as these next 4. Coming in at number 4, we have Reunion and Turnabout, the second case from the second game. And holy freaking crap, you guys, I loved this case. I loved it. This is the one case that if I didn't do any research and really like educate myself on the intricate details, like all of the things you have to appreciate and respect from these other cases, this case probably stands out the most to me. I loved the twist, the twin thing, the fact that freaking Mimi was Eni and Eni was Mimi and Mimi stole Eni's face because Eni was the one that died, even though we thought Mimi died and we were talking to Eni, but it was really Mimi the whole time. Oh, I'm obsessed. Like I'm actually obsessed. Similarly, this case also introduced a lot of important people, things, and elements that would come into play more later. This is the case where we met Pearl Fay. We also got introduced to the Magatama in this case, which duh, how freaking awesome was that? I have loved that element since this case. This is the case where we met Franziska and we got to see how much she took after her father and his insanely evil tendencies. We also got to meet Dr. Hottie. And this was Morgan Fay's first attempt to truly overthrow Maya Fey as the next rightful master of Kurain and try to insert her daughter Pearl. And oh my God, I just love it. I love this case so much. The twists, the plan, the fact that Morgan and Mimi Eni were in on it at the same time. They were in cahoots, they were working together. Oh, and the 2 separate motivations. Again, Morgan just wanting Maya out of the way for Pearl. Mimi Eni wanting revenge for Eni Mimi. Oh my, I just can't, I can't. I loved the whole right door driver's side British car thing. The fact that Phoenix kicked down an entire door after he heard gunshots, king. This case also had a lot of really fun investigative elements with the box that appeared in the side room, the bullet-sized hole in the robe, the folding screen, and the box. Again, Mimi actually having been the one to survive the car crash, but she also was the one who killed those 14 patients the year before, taking on an entire new life as her sister by taking her face. Oh my goodness. This case and the plot was just freaking amazing. Like, I really do not have much more to say. This was also Franziska's first loss of many and the first of Phoenix's many whippings. Okay, this case was just so good, and that is why it is in spot number 4 for me. Y'all, I went back and forth with this case and case number 2 for some time, okay? These could arguably be a little bit interchangeable for me. Case number 2 just came out a little bit higher than this case. So in spot 3 for these rankings, we have Farewell, My Turnabout, the finale of the second game. This case started off with a bang, okay? Maya just getting kidnapped out of the blue and her basically being gone, held hostage, and starved for most of the game. What the heck? This was another case where I just really loved the story and found it to be very interesting. Like, we're literally dealing with a masked assassin named D Killer? Seriously? Crazy. The relationships, plural, between Celeste, Adrian, Matt, and Juan, messy. And this was our first time where we were actually defending a person we knew not only was a terrible person, but was guilty. Oh, so cool. Like, we were kind of defending him, right? Like, we did not want to represent him. We did not want to defend him, but it was literally either get him found not guilty or lose Maya to D-Killer. What a crazy situation to be in. And even before we got to that point, this case had my thoughts all over the place. Okay, there were times where I thought Matt Engarde was truly innocent and Adrienne Andrews was the guilty one. Like, what? Gumshoe getting into a car accident, Franziska getting shot and ending up at Hottie Clinic, Edgeworth threatening to reveal Adrienne Andrews' personal information about her mental health issues and unalive attempt on the stand. What was going on? I loved that Shoe made an appearance. I also, you know, loved is a weird word to describe cross-examining a walkie-talkie, but like, that is something that still plagues me and surprises me to this day. Like, obviously insane, but also so cool. Like, we put the assassin on the stand. And the case ended when we proved to the assassin that his client was actually blackmailing him, breaking the contract between the assassin and the client, having the assassin turn on the client, and then the client, Matt Engarde, choosing to be found guilty at risk of being in prison for the rest of his life or sentenced to death, all to avoid a potential encounter with D-Killer outside of the courthouse. And to think this case only happened because of one man's jealousy over another man formerly dating his girlfriend. Whew. This case was amazing. I loved the scene it was set in. I love that Will Powers made a return. It was such a great way to end Justice for All and is definitely deserving of spot number 3. All right, you guys, we are down to our final 2 cases, and coming in at spot number 2, our runner-up, if you will, is Turnabout Goodbyes. This may be a shock to some of you. For others, maybe this is not that big of a surprise, but this case was so good to me. As y'all know, this case set up an insane amount of tea with the DL6 incident, and we also got so much background between the childhood relationships of Edgeworth, Phoenix, and Larry, and especially a lot of information about Edgeworth's childhood specifically. And Edgeworth was on trial this time, which brought such a unique element and direness to this case, if you will. Also bringing a direness to the case is that we learned very early on that the statute of limitations on the DL6 incident was going to be running in 3 days. That just made this case feel that much more stressful. And I love when they bring actual real life legal elements into this game because it doesn't happen very often. And although we knew in our heart of hearts that Edgeworth was innocent, this case set up the motive for Edgeworth being guilty very well. The fact that our victim in this case was the defense attorney in the DL6 incident, the guy that got off the actual person who murdered Edgeworth's dad, that guy is the one that died. Yeah, the motive for Edgeworth was obvious. You are the reason my dad never received justice and why his killer is still out there roaming the streets. Like, of course you deserve to die. That was my perspective, at least. Like, again, I knew Edgeworth didn't do it, but how was I gonna prove that? And the irony of the prosecutor prosecuting Edgeworth being Manfred von Karma, Edgeworth's mentor and pseudo-father in a way? That was just crazy. Von Karma was obviously the absolute worst, sustaining his own objections and having Maya arrested for just questioning the witness's credibility. Didn't love. What I did love looking back though was the whole right hand, left hand discrepancy in the picture and the whole story about the murder we thought happening on the boat, but it actually happened at the boathouse before, and the whole boat murder was staged and fake. Like, watching that story unfold was crazy. Also wild was getting tased in the evidence room once we found out about Von Karma's involvement with DL6. You know, this case just had so many elements that if you look at them one by one, you're like, how did all of these things happen in the same case? Like, what? And of course, we can't forget Polly, our testifying parrot, the parrot we literally put on the stand to cross-examine. Oh man. The fact that we went from the Robert Hammond murder trial to the DL6 murder trial in the same case, and the whole thing ended by us putting a metal detector on Manfred von Karma's shoulder to find a 15-year-old bullet, proving his involvement with the DL6 incident and solving both cases entirely? absolutely iconic, I fear. I will say the Gordy side story didn't really do anything for me. Again, maybe just kind of going down the whole fantasy monster thing, not really being of interest to me. But I do like how it set up Lotta Hart's purpose of her being on the lake and taking that picture that obviously came in very good use. And Von Karma was obviously a terribly terrifying adversary, and seeing his defeat was so satisfying. But raising the son of a man you killed for him to be like you, only to later frame him for a murder he didn't even do, is under the jail behavior. I am so glad we left Manfred Von Karma in the past, and the cherry on top was finding out that Larry was actually the one who stole Edgeworth's lunch money when all three of them two and Phoenix were children, and that being the reason behind Phoenix, Larry, and Edgeworth kind of all becoming childhood friends. That was almost as precious as Mia's spirit showing up in the final photo after the game ended. Ugh. What a perfect way to tie up the game. And this case gave us almost Christmas means it wasn't Christmas. Like, what more can I say, people? This case was absolutely iconic, absolutely incredible, one of my favorites to date, but it does not take the #1 spot. Coming in hot at spot #1, the absolute best case in the entire Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy is the very final case, the trilogy finale, if you will, Bridge to the Turnabout. It's really difficult not to rank this case as the absolute best case of the entire trilogy because it literally tied up every single loose end I had for the entire 13 games prior. Finally finding out what happened to Misty Faye, only to have her die tragically in the moments we reconnected. Finding out that Pearl, Iris, and Dahlia are all sisters and are all children of the evil freaking Morgan Faye. Diving even deeper into the Faye clan history and their whole family's backstory. Finding out that Iris and Dahlia had switched places in the whole relationship with Phoenix. Finding out that Udgy and Budgy were brothers. This case was wild from beginning to end, especially with the fact that for a lot of it, Pearl was missing and Maya was missing. Oh my gosh, the stakes had never been higher. I loved everything about this case. The fact that we didn't even start off as Phoenix, so Edgeworth had to take one for the team, slide in, and we got to play as him as a defense attorney against Franziska, who also decided to become helpful, not only in the courtroom, but having her join us on our investigation and getting to see her dialogue was absolutely wild. And I just loved the scene and the setting of this case, the snow, being up in the mountains, being like secluded and having it be kind of like, listen, whatever happens up here, completely disconnected from the outside world. Like, nobody is coming on this mountain and nobody is leaving off this mountain, so the murderer must be around here, except plot twist, we didn't really know he was. The snow, the lightning storm, the bridge catching on fire, Phoenix falling off of the bridge, me thinking that somebody had died, somebody other than Misty Faye, Edgeworth helping Phoenix, Franziska helping Phoenix, Phoenix's growth as he was forced to sustain the rest of the trial by himself without any assistance from a Faye or a Skye, and then Godot. Oh my God, Godot. The whole red light mask turning off the lights in the courtroom thing, the whole backstory, the connection to Red White. Oh, the intricacy of the elements of him not being able to see the bloody Maya, tying back to Recipe for Turnabout and not being able to see the ketchup on the apron. It was just so good. Like, this case truly tied everything up for me. His true motive for hating Phoenix so much coming out. Oh my, it was just so good, you guys. The only thing I did not like about this case that I can think of is the freaking pendulum. Again, don't think that's an unpopular opinion. I didn't like it the moment we saw it in the case, but that's okay because no case is going to be perfect, but this case was as close as we have gotten for me. Y'all, I really don't have much more to say. Bridge to the Turnabout is a case that I really liked from the beginning, but one I had no idea would turn out how it did. And the feeling of pure satisfaction, getting to see everything play out, getting to see all those loose ends getting tied up, and having an answer for the questions I had dang near since the beginning, iconic. I think this case rightfully belongs in the #1 spot, bringing our rankings to a close. So guys, those are my final rankings. Every single case from the very first trilogy of this franchise. What a freaking ride this has been. I have never dived deep into a game's details, history, all of that like I have with Phoenix Wright. And the amount of content, the amount of joy, the memories, the community we have built because of it, I will forever be grateful. But the fun is not stopping here, okay? Definitely subscribe if you are not, because next week we will be starting a brand new Ace Attorney game, and I cannot wait. I also may not have something special in store for the very first episode as well. So you're definitely gonna wanna tune in. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you for being with me for what, a year and a half basically at this point? Whether you found me for my very first video in June of 2023 or this is your first time seeing me, I love you all the same. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being part of my community, and thank you for joining the fam. And I could sit here and ramble on for 5 minutes about how much I've loved this game, but you guys have heard me say it enough, okay? Clearly my appreciation has no bounds. I am so happy that I got to experience this, and I cannot wait to get into next week's video. So I'm gonna let you go. Thank you for watching. Leave your rankings in the comments. I do want to see them, genuinely. And until next time, I will see you guys in my next video. Goodbye and go thrive.